There's a silence that follows the roar of a life collapsing, a vacuum where the predictable hum of shared existence once vibrated. This is the sound of a woman walking into a psychological minefield, one she has spent years meticulously convincing herself does not exist. It is a moment of profound, brutal reckoning, far removed from the romanticized cinematic narratives of new beginnings and finding oneself. What unfolds is not the neat, clean closure advertised in self-help memoirs, but a messy, multi-phased collision with an unvarnished reality. A collision so fundamental that it forces the brain to literally contort its neural pathways just to survive the sheer, overwhelming force of cognitive dissonance. The fantasy, so often nurtured in the quiet resentment of a long-term marriage, is the trade of a flawed certainty for a perfect illusion. The man left behind, perhaps scrolling through filtered images of his ex-wife, posting saccharine quotes about empowerment and thriving, is often consumed by a corrosive self-doubt, believing she has ascended to a higher plane of happiness while he drowns in the wreckage. But the polished surface of her social media performance is nothing more than a freshly lacquered facade over a rapidly disintegrating structure. She has not found freedom. She has merely traded gravity for weightlessness, and is now adrift in a psychological space where the reassuring pull of a shared life is gone, replaced by a terrifying, boundless void. The first phase of this journey, predictably, is the honeymoon with herself, an intoxicating period lasting perhaps a few weeks or months. This is a dopamine spike fueled by novelty and external validation, a euphoria born not of genuine happiness, but of release. Every morning is a congratulation, a mental high five for her courage, her strength, her independence. The physical space is redecorated, symbolizing the exorcism of the past. The self is rebranded, a new yoga class, a revitalized wardrobe, the thrill of downloading the dating applications. Her friends, a crucial psychological chorus, shower her with validation, a steady drip feed of affirmation that feels like a powerful addictive narcotic. You look amazing, you're glowing, you deserve so much better. During this time, she is not inhabiting reality. She is living entirely inside a story she is telling herself about reality. A carefully curated screenplay where she is the triumphant heroine who escaped a suffocating mediocrity. The phone buzzes relentlessly with the attention she hasn't felt in years, a digital swarm of matches and messages. She interprets this relentless quantity as definitive evidence of her decision's correctness, mistaking superficial attention for deep intention, novelty for value, and fleeting desire for genuine regard. This is the peak of the illusion, where the sheer volume of external affirmation acts as a powerful psychological buffer against the still, small voice of doubt. Yet, this high is unsustainable, for it is built upon the fragile foundation of the unknown. Then comes the awakening, a phase that arrives not as a dramatic explosion, but as a slow-motion car crash, a subtle, inexorable grinding of the narrative against the hard edges of fact. It begins with the first real date since the divorce, the kind where the man is perfect on paper, successful, handsome, articulate. The conversation flows, the drinks are fine, and everything adheres to the script until the end of the night, when a sudden, jarring realization hits her with the force of an unexpected wave. This man, charming as he may be, does not know her. He does not know the small, absurd intricacies of her emotional architecture. The irrational fear of thunderstorms, the compulsive need to check the locks 3 times before sleep, the specific commercial involving dogs that never fails to bring her to tears. To him, she is a profile, a possibility, a Friday night. She is a commodity. The crack in her perfect narrative is born from this profound, chilling recognition of being utterly unknown. Admitting doubt now is psychologically impossible. It would invalidate the months of self-congratulation and the entire social structure she's built around being brave. So she doubles down, escalating the performance, more dates, more nights out, more frantic pursuit. But the intoxication is fading. The compliments feel hollow, the laughter rings false. She begins to notice the texture of these new men. The casual disrespect of a charming conversationalist who constantly talks over her, the emotional unavailability hidden beneath a great job title, the irresponsibility masked by spontaneity. Subconsciously, the brain, being a relentless pattern-matching machine, begins its inevitable work of comparison. She is measuring the chaotic, unpredictable nature of the dating pool against the known, established stability of her former life. She is comparing the parade of superficial suitors to the man who was, if nothing else, home. He was the context for her daily life, the silent anchor in her storm. And in hindsight, stripped of the daily friction of marriage, he begins to look better. Not because he was a perfect man, but because he was a perfectly known man, a safe and predictable haven in a sea of emotional volatility. This comparison, occurring entirely beneath the surface of her conscious, still defiant mind, accelerates the descent into the third phase. The descent culminates in the panic, typically hitting around the 6 to 8 month mark, a period of profound social and emotional erosion. The novelty has vanished. Her friends, once her cheerleaders, are exhausted by the repetitive saga of her dating life. They have their own marriages to navigate, and the presence of a newly single friend begins to feel less like a cause to champion and more like a contagious threat. Her children, if they exist, are acting out, their shattered world reflecting her internal chaos, a chaos she's been too preoccupied with finding herself to truly absorb. The happiness she projects has become a grueling, high-stakes theatrical performance. Every Instagram post, every public smile, is a tremendous expenditure of psychological energy. And she is an actress who has not only forgotten her lines, but has forgotten why she took the role in the first place. This panic manifests as manic overdrive, a frantic, desperate lunge for external validation, an excess of activity to avoid the unbearable silence of her own thoughts. Or it can manifest as retreat, entire weekends spent in bed, scrolling through old photos, engaging in the cruelest of self-tortures, rewriting history. Maybe the marriage wasn't that bad. Maybe I was too harsh. Maybe he has changed. The foundation of her post-divorce identity, the narrative of the brave woman who made the right choice, is built on the premise that the marriage was flawed beyond repair. To admit she miscalculated would be to suffer an irrecoverable psychological injury. So instead of admitting fault, she reframes the past, creating a new, more palatable delusion that he must have changed, making a potential reconciliation permissible without admitting her error. This allows her to entertain the idea of going back, not because she was wrong, but because circumstances have magically corrected themselves. The true hammer blow, however, comes from the brutal economics of the dating market, a reality that romantic comedies and motivational platitudes conveniently omit. The dating pool for a divorced woman, especially one with children and over a certain age, is ruthlessly stratified. The quality men are largely sequestered, either happily taken or with an abundance of options, making her compete with women who arrive unburdened by the baggage of history. She is forced to navigate a predictable landscape of suitors. The players, who view her vulnerability and eagerness for connection as an easy target, the emotionally unavailable, whose primary qualification is a good salary, and the married men, who offer the seductive toxicity of an affair, conveniently omitting the existence of a wife until the third date. She starts to internalize a terrifying truth. The market value she believed she possessed, inflated by years of validation from her spouse and friends, does not exist in the cold, transactional reality of the single life. The hundreds of matches on the apps are mirages. The compliments are boilerplate messages sent to dozens of other women, and the chemistry she felt is merely a generalized availability. She is simply another profile among thousands. Her internal standards, which remain tethered to her pre-divorce reality, clash violently with her new market reality. The statistical probability of finding a single, emotionally mature, financially stable, attractive man willing to take on a ready-made family is so astronomically low that it would make a lottery ticket seem like a solid investment. To cope, she begins the agonizing process of compromise, which she tells herself is being open-minded. She accepts treatment she never would have tolerated before, rationalizing it as going with the flow. She tolerates disrespect, framing it as not sweating the small stuff. Each compromise is a microscopic chip at her self-esteem, but the alternative, the full, unvarnished confession of a catastrophic error, is too psychologically costly. The ultimate psychological unraveling culminates in the reckoning, a phase that can drag on for years, though it often begins around the 1-year mark. This is when the psychological defense mechanisms, the endless stream of self-affirming narratives, finally fail. The loneliness is no longer a temporary inconvenience. It is a crushing, existential awareness. She didn't just wish for company, she blew up her entire life structure for a fantasy that is demonstrably, agonizingly non-existent. She will find herself sitting in her quiet apartment, perhaps after yet another disappointing date or a weekend where the children were with their father, and the magnitude of her action will strike her. The irreversibility of the choice. She traded a real, albeit flawed, relationship for a perfect, but imaginary one. The weight of this truth is so immense that her mind may literally shut down its emotional centers just to survive. This is the root of the Sunday night syndrome, the phenomenon where divorced women experience their worst moments as the weekend performance ends, the distractions fade, and the quiet truth of her aloneness creeps in between getting ready for bed and falling asleep. She is alone, truly alone, not empowered or free, but simply untethered, and the universe conspires to remind her of what she discarded. The physical touch deficit becomes a profound, unconscious source of distress. It is not about sex, but about the thousand small, automatic moments of contact that serve as neurological affirmations of belonging. The hand on the lower back, the casual foot under the covers, the automatic hug of shared existence. Human touch is a biological need, and the sudden cessation of meaningful, non-transactional contact causes the body to rebel, leading to elevated stress hormones, fractured sleep, and a low-grade emotional numbness, a sickness born of skin hunger. Admitting this need, however, is admitting dependence on the very intimacy she rejected. Simultaneously, the man who was left behind is on a trajectory of healing, a journey that typically progresses in an inverse, agonizing symmetry to her own. Men, psychologically, often process the trauma of divorce by internalizing the pain, rebuilding through action, and focusing on self-improvement. By the time she reaches peak regret, he is often moved through his own phases of shock, anger, and sadness. He has already begun the process of becoming someone new, a person who has learned from the marriage and the divorce, focusing his energy on growth and stability. This creates the cruelest irony. She begins to see the man she always claimed she wanted him to be, but he has achieved that transformation because of losing her, not for her. The knowledge that she catalyzed his improvement but will never benefit from it, that her abandonment was the necessary catalyst for his ascension, is a unique, excruciating form of psychological torture that haunts her sleepless nights. His happiness becomes the final, incontrovertible proof that the problem was not the marriage itself, but her perception of it. He was capable of love and happiness. She just couldn't see it, or, worse, saw it, but demanded an unsustainable, impossible perfection. The social landscape, once a source of strength, becomes a psychological warfare zone. Her married friends, instinctively protecting their own marriages, distance themselves. She has become an uncomfortable reminder that the bedrock of their lives is not immutable. Her single friends, the new tribe, become unwelcome competition in the limited dating pool, where friendship is secondary to survival. The social ecosystem she counted on for validation reveals itself to be conditional and fair weather. She realizes, with a crushing finality, that her husband was not just a husband. He was her emergency contact, her default plus one, her best friend, the quiet co-pilot of her existence. And she voluntarily fired him. This entire psychological journey is underscored by the unrelenting stress of cognitive dissonance. Her brain is trapped between two incompatible truths. I made the right decision by leaving, and I am miserable, and everything is worse now. The energy required to maintain this facade, to bridge the ever-widening gap between her public persona and her private reality, is literally exhausting. She feels like an undercover agent in her own existence, performing a double life that slowly bleeds her soul dry. The ultimate revelation, usually arriving years too late, is the tragic synthesis of all these themes. She didn't leave because he wasn't enough. She left because she was projecting her own deep-seated dissatisfaction with herself onto the relationship. The feeling of restlessness, the belief that something was missing, the sense that life should be more exciting, these were all internal deficits. Leaving the marriage did not solve these internal problems. It merely stripped away the external stability that had made them tolerable, forcing her to face them alone. She gets exactly what she asked for: freedom, independence, the chance to start over. And she discovers that what she asked for and what she wanted were two completely different things. She wanted to feel alive. She got emotional numbness. She wanted excitement. She got chaos. She wanted to be desired. She became disposable. She wanted better. She got different. And different in this equation is not just worse. It is the brutal, irreversible, solitary truth that she traded a complex, imperfect, genuine reality for a flawless, unattainable, self-constructed fantasy. And that fantasy was the biggest, most devastating lie she ever told herself. The market doesn't care what one thinks they deserve. Reality simply presents the bill, and she is left to pay it, watching from the sidelines as the life she sabotaged is successfully built by the man she left, but with someone else who finally appreciated its quiet, priceless worth.